Welcome back, guys, to another week. Glad to have you with us. Myself, Richard Dingle, owner, CEO of the Dingle Agency, and my good friend Jerry Luna here, marketing
Hey,
expert.
happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So today's topic is one that we are truly, truly excited to go over and bring to you guys. So I'm hoping everybody gets a lot of information out of today's topic. But as always, if you do enjoy our show, if this is your first time, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch us weekly, and definitely come back in for more. So without further ado, today's topic here, I think culturally, we've been dealing with a work-life balance. It's especially in these past, I would say, 5 to 10 years, these past decades, work-life balance. That topic has really meant a lot to people. It stirs up a lot of emotion. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, they say. So, um, but I believe, and I'll have biblical context to back this up, but I believe you're doing it backwards, right? Instead of working to live, why don't you live to work? And we've all heard that statement being thrown around. I work to live, not live to work. But if
hmm
that's what the 90% is doing, you will get the 90% result. So today we'll talk about the importance of living to work and what it actually means biblically and what it would do for your business.
Yeah, and it's so true that 90% of people say that, but do you want the results of the 90%? No, you want the results of the 1%. So what are the 1% doing? How do they view work? And so we'll go into that, but it's just like you said. You definitely don't want to be doing what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that leads us kind of to our first question, which I want to go over here, Jerry. Now, what does it mean to live to work rather than to work to live? And Jerry, you've been an entrepreneur for most of, well, all the time I know you. So, your take on this, what does it mean to live to work rather than work to live? What does that mean to you?
So live to work is almost like your lifestyle. Like there's no end goal, there's no end point where you'll never work for the rest of your life. If the work simply changes, and if you have a mindset of, I'm just working to live, you're basically just going to be a slave to the next paycheck, But if you live to work, then like every all the work that you do, you're kind of pouring yourself into that work. It's almost a reflection of yourself. So there, like if you look at Bill Gates, he doesn't have to work, right? But the wealthiest people don't stop working. The wealthiest people on earth, the work simply changes. So, Bill Gates, let's say, like, maybe he's not directly involved with his companies anymore, but the kind of work that he does is meaningful to him. He enjoys doing it. There's not a moment where people get rich enough to just sit on the beach and do nothing, right? There like the wealthiest people, the most successful people, they don't aim at doing nothing. They aim at doing the work that is meaningful, that is fulfilling, that they enjoy, that that brings happiness to them and around themselves. So it doesn't make sense to, the work to live mentality is that of an employee, somebody
Oh, yes.
that is doing the least amount of effort possible to scrape by to do the minimum, but is that what you want in life? The minimum of things. So it's more meaningful to pour into your work, because it's an honor to have something to work on, to pour some of yourself into whatever work you're doing. Do you agree with that, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I have a couple of scriptures I want to go over, especially pertaining to this uh, topic here. But before that, I do want to say, if you just break down the statement and just look at it, that tells you it's not a good one, right? It doesn't have positively attached to it, and that's, I think, cultural. When we're talking about the enemy, the devil leading us down the wrong path, it's always disguised as something. This is good for you. You need your rest, right? It's something gratifying, but then when you look towards the end result, it's not. And what I mean by that is living, working to live sounds cool until you realize it is a survival mentality. You are saying, I'm only working to survive. I am not working to thrive. I'm only
Exactly.
working to survive. I'm working to live, right? So, and then that means I'm working for the sole purpose of acquiring food, right? Whereas living to work is, if I live to work, I live to do what I do. That means I'm living for a purpose. I'm here for a purpose. And you'll hear me reference this a couple of times. But for example, a doctor, when a doctor becomes a doctor, we're not saying don't take vacation. I want to say that for first. We're not saying don't take vacation, don't take a break, don't relax. But when a doctor is on vacation, do you think if somebody is passed out or bleeding out, do you think the doctor is going to stand there and not do anything? Oh, I'm on vacation. I'm not a
Yeah.
doctor right
I'm
now.
off the
Right now.
clock. Sorry,
I'm off the
guys.
clock, right? No, the doctor is definitely going to help. And if they stood there and did nothing, do you think they would be allowed to keep their doctor's license? No, and everybody would cancel that person. Everybody would be like, he's not a doctor. He should have helped
He's
that person,
lazy.
blah, blah. But when the shoe is on the other foot, I'm a firefighter and fire is going, any service people, they live for that calling. But I'm an office manager. In my case, I'm a life insurance agent. I don't talk to anybody about life insurance anymore. I'm off the clock right now. I don't want to talk about finances. No, that's you live that. Then you probably should choose a different path. Maybe that is not your path, right? And a scriptural reference I want to go over is John 4, the Gospel of John 4, verse 4. And I have the King James Version here, but I'm going to read the New International Version because I think it's a little bit easier to digest. So, the backstory about John 4, this is Jesus, the same chapter where Jesus is speaking to the Samaritan woman. So this is the same where he's traveling to Galilee, him and his disciples traveling to Galilee from Jerusalem, and he passes through Samaria, right? And he meets the Samaritan woman at the well, and that whole thing happened before this. So at this point, the Samaritan woman runs away and say, "Oh, come meet a man that has told me everything I know. He's the Messiah," basically telling the town the Messiah is outside at the well and bringing everybody over. So as she's doing that, the disciples now comes back up. They went in to look for food from the market, the Bible says. They're coming back up to talk to Jesus. And so when they approach him, they said, meanwhile, his disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat something. That's verse 31. Verse 32 says, but he said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. 33, then his disciples said to each other, could someone have brought him food? And Jesus, seeing this, verse 34, said, my food, said Jesus, is to do the will of him who sent me and finish his work. So I want to stop there. And to say, I mean, if Jesus said, I live by doing his work, right? And my food, I get nourished by accomplishing the work. I don't accomplish work in order to get nourished, but the work is my nourishment, right? It's
Hmm.
basically what he's saying there. Um, I mean, if he can say that, that's something, and we all know if you believe in Jesus Christ, right? If you know Jesus Christ, then we should be patterning, right? If he's credible, that means everything he says is credible, right? And I would say so, right? No, none more credible than him. So that means if Jesus says, work for a purpose, let your purpose fuel you, let your purpose energize you, let your purpose, fill you up, work till you don't taking a break, you should have to take a break.
Hmm.
Right? You're taking a break because you have to. You're not working because you have to, right? And I think that's super important. That's a way to look at, living for your work, living for your purpose. And if you don't find purpose in what you're doing, that's a prime directive that you need to find a different purpose, or you need to do something else.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I love that quote that you mentioned, and it's so important to like what you're doing and to feel that what you're doing is meaningful. If you don't, you're not going to do your best work. Like there's been times in my career where I wake up as early as I can because I can't stop thinking about how excited I am to get started on this thing, this project. So, there's times in my career where I felt the opposite too, where I don't feel excited and I don't enter flow state and I don't do good work. And after reading what I write, when in that mindset, it's definitely not as good as when I'm excited, I'm thrilled, I'm locked in, and I get a lot of meaning from it. But um, and the clients, when they read something, they can tell, like, oh wow, Jerry, like this is very insightful, great work on this. But when
Hmm.
something is mediocre, you don't even feel excited to show people. You don't feel proud that you did it too. So, the like it's important to have that energy, to have that love for what you're doing.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you're not gonna produce anything of great importance to you or to other people. So it's so important to like and love what you're doing.
yes. And in our on another episode, we talked about wanting, that power of want. And I think, yeah, it's important to want to do what you're doing, want to be there, you know.
Yeah, if you're just going through the motions, nothing great was made by somebody just going through the motions. It was somebody that was, dedicated to doing a good job. If you're painting, if you're writing copy, if you're doing sales, if you're talking to anybody, people can really feel that energy. And I think it was Frederick Engels that said the same thing about, maybe not Engels actually, Hegel. Hegel talked about this was pre-communism, right? But
Hmm.
Hegelians talk about that the work that you do should include like part of you in it. That's what makes it part of you. The work that you do, that work that you create. And this was a time when factories started coming up, and 12 to 16-hour work days,
Hmm.
were normal, and people were feeling separated from their work. And so he talked about like the workers not feeling attached to their creations,
Yeah,
because psychologically it's so important.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love that what you said about nothing great was made through mediocrity. Just on the fact that, I mean, you ask Usain Bolt or Michael Phelps, that are both multi-Olympic gold medal champions. How did you guys become a gold medalist? Oh, we were just out walking around.
Yeah. Oh, we did the minimal amount of
We're
work.
like, yeah, we was just working, No, they can be intentional about it and tell you, hard work, this, that, I did this,
Yeah.
and I ended up here. Now, did I foresee every step of the way that I think that I was going to be here? There's probably some times that you didn't feel like you were going to make it there, right? But you did have a purpose in mind. Which, speaking of which, how do you, or how do you, Jerry, on a personal level, see that Jesus or think Jesus kind of embodied the idea of a fulfilling purpose?
Well, the work was nourishing for his soul. You know, the work itself, you know, spreading the word, and I feel like, you know, that to him, you know, was like, I don't know how to say it, you know, but like, the work for him was the nourishment, right? Like you said that he refused the food because,
Hmm.
you know, the important thing for him, you know, was the work that he was doing, you know, spreading the word.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think too, I mean, if you look at that same, you read, please read this passage, guys. It's very powerful. But if you read that same passage, a little bit further down, he's talking about, he said, see, look, here, the field is ripe for harvest, basically, and saying these are the people coming in. He's referring to them as food, right? People coming in and say, oh, come look at the Messiah, come and talk with him. So I think he was also saying like the food me eating right now, it's going to be a distraction because we got to wash our hands. We got to sit down. We got to, like this is meal time. People is not going to come and interrupt us in our meal. Like, especially back then, right? You have to be respectful when people are eating. So, but people are coming now for a word. So let's go to work. Our work is speaking to people about love of God and repenting for their sins and just his whole message, doing right by your brother. So I think, yeah, for him, he was saying that, and you hear, I heard Beyonce said that she was working on her tour and working so hard that she forgot to eat for 3 days. 3 days.
Wow.
3 days. You forgot to eat.
Mhm.
Right? Plenty of artists will say we forgot to sleep. We forgot, that's how strong that purpose is, that calling is, that sometimes you're in the flow state as we talked about, where you just forget things. And
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think Jesus is a big embodiment of, that because so many times in the scripture you'll hear him say, "My time has not come." So he embodied purpose. My time has not come yet. Or everything he did was with a purpose, right? He'll go certain ways. For example, in that story, the Jews didn't have to go through Samaria in order to get to Galilee, right? They made it a point in the Bible to notate that Jews would actually intentionally avoid Samaria. They would take the long way around, right? And
Mhm.
avoid there because they didn't like the Samaritans, right? So they would avoid it, but Jesus purposefully, with a purpose, went through there in order to accomplish something, right? So I think it's the same way we should be making our decisions with the express purpose in mind. So I did want to go over John 19, same thing, Gospel of John 19 and 30. Um, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished," and he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Right? So this is Jesus on the cross. This is Jesus saying, "My work is done."
Mhm.
What did he do? He died. Right? Your work, he's showing us his work is done when he's dead. Our work is done when we're dead. What is the first command? If you look at Genesis, what's the first command that God gave us? Is to take care of the garden that we had, right? He placed man in the garden to oversee the garden, right? And then he said, be fruitful. That's a job. Be fruitful.
Be fruitful.
Multiply.
Yeah.
That's another job, right?
Yeah. And
And
he said,
so,
multiply and be fruitful, not by doing nothing, not
yeah,
by not working.
subdue the earth and have dominion over. This is telling us he had a purpose. He created man for a purpose. So you can't be a wandering generality is what was what's his name that I always quote, Zig Ziglar talks about it in his book. He calls it a wandering generality where people just wander around and hope to land somewhere. So you have to have a purpose. You have to have a
Yeah.
drive. And a lot of times that gut thing that you've had hold on to that you really want to do, that's probably your purpose. Go ahead and chase it.
Life happens to the energetic too. Like if you
Yes.
wait for things to happen to you, like your life isn't going to go the way you want. If you're not actively working towards something, and putting your energy towards productive means, then you'll easily slip into drug addiction, into lethargy, into atheism because you think nothing matters. So it's very dangerous when you have nothing important or meaningful that you're working towards. If you're not engaged with what you're doing in your work, then that's a recipe for mental illness. And God doesn't want you to sit on your hands and wait for life to happen to you. Like there's a
Yeah.
common saying that like you have to row the boat, right? You have to
Yes.
uh like Jesus, gives you the wind, but you have to row. Like he'll point the boat, but you have to actually put in the work to get to where
Yes.
you want to go.
Yeah.
He'll give you the
Absolutely.
opportunity to go in that direction. But if you do nothing, then you'll never get to that destination that he wants you to go to.
Yeah. I mean, and do you kind of see, you say most of those problems that you just listed comes from people treating, work as a necessity instead of a purpose?
Yeah, it's an honor to have work. The times in my life where I've been saddest is when I have nothing to work on, nothing interesting to to dive into. Those have been the worst times. And the happiest I've ever been is when I have, meaningful work to do, when I feel excited to get up and work and do and provide value. So have you felt that same way, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's been a couple times in my life where I thought, man, this is my divine calling. Like, this is what God
This is
wants me
it.
to
This is
do,
it. Yeah.
and it just, the amount of productivity and the ability you're able to accomplish those tasks or whatever you're doing with at that time, for me, at least personally, I mean, I've told the story. I thought I was a divine appointed rapper, right? Listen, God,
Rapper,
one day
really?
I'm
I don't
gonna
know
be
this
a
about you.
rapper, right?
But
And
God wants me to do rap.
and I wholeheartedly believe that. And so when working at it, I was really good. I put out quality work. I put in a lot of time, a lot of effort. You would call me to go to the studio, I'm there, right? And when I didn't feel that way anymore about it, because I found another purpose, I found another calling, something that was a little bit stronger, um, and I didn't put in the effort. I did feel like this is the necessary evil, for better lack of better term, something to distract me. But either way, I knew God called me to use my voice. So now I'm not a rapper, I'm not rhyming, but I'm rapping. I am rapping to the people right now, right? It's just not rhyming and there's no beat behind it. So I realized, okay, maybe God doesn't want me using my voice in that way, but still using my voice, right? And so whatever I do, I still put a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of purpose behind my actions when it comes to using my voice. So, does that make sense? I hope that
Yeah,
answers, yeah, the
makes great
question.
sense. It also reminds me of what Myron Golden says about the work works on you more than you work on it. So just the nature of you sitting down and putting your all into a project, into a piece of work, you're in a way creating a different version of yourself, a better version. And just by nature of doing the work, you're going to see some changes psychologically, emotionally, than if you were just to sit down and smoke weed for an hour. Like that work that you do is going to work on you. And if you do that 1,000 times, you're only going to sculpt a beautiful piece of marble out of yourself, and the work will continually be improved on. So you'll be able to produce even more valuable work after, you know, after learning the value of what you're doing. Like you're working on yourself a lot of times. You're making yourself, more intelligent, more diligent, more focused. Even if the project fails, you've still accomplished something because you yourself put 100 hours in, 1,000 hours in. So those changes, they stack up over time.
Yes, yes, I agree. I mean, and for those people that are facing discouragement when it comes to working, and maybe sometimes we forget what we're working for. One thing I always put in we use GroupMe for our team, and the chat. And one thing I always put in there with a lot of our communication is Colossians 23, where it says, "Whatever you do, do with all your heart as you're working unto the Lord and not for human hands." So make sure I'm reading it right. It's the NIV version. Whatever you do, work with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for a human master. All right. So you're not working for your boss. You're not working for your kids. That's going to
You're
shock
working
some
for the
people.
Lord.
That's going to shock some people. You're not working for your kids. You're not working for your family. You're not even working for you. You're working for God, a higher purpose, right? You're working for something that He has called for you. And He said that all things work together for your good, according to who that are called by, according to His purpose. So if you're called to do what you're doing, and you're working at it, even the bad times, even the times when you struggle, trust me, like you said, Myron does, right? It is working on you in those times,
Hmm.
right? And you're working for God at those times, while the work that He's provided you with is working on you. How powerful is that?
So powerful.
Next question I do want to ask though is, how do you discern the difference between being productive and purposeful? And what does that mean
An
to you? Like, what
interesting
is the difference?
distinction.
Yeah.
What does that distinction mean to you? I'm curious. I don't have anything solid, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on
Yeah, for sure. So for me, the distinction between productive is doing things right, whereas purposeful is doing the right things, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is, okay, so me being productive is me going from point A to point B. Let's say I have to um, let's knock out some paperwork for my business, right? Me being productive is knocking out all the paperwork and being meticulous about the paperwork, right? That is me knocking out everything in the business that I need to do, those little tasks, right? Submit this policy, maybe talk to this person. That's me being productive throughout the day. Whereas me being purposeful would be, okay, let's not knock out paperwork, maybe hire somebody to knock out paperwork, right? At that point. And let's get more client, protect more people, right? Because the purpose of my business is to protect more people, right? So I must be purpose driven, and me hiring somebody to knock out paperwork, well, that's me providing somebody a job. There's another purpose fulfilled, right? So my purpose is to help people, so therefore, everything I do must be to help people and not myself. Me knocking out the paperwork myself and doing everything in the business myself is just helping myself, keeping the money in my pockets and just feeding my family. But what
it.
about feeding someone else's family? What about making sure when tragedy strikes, as many people as possible we can reach have life insurance, have policies to call. When strategy strikes, like for example, the thing that happened down in Texas with the flood and the camp, I'm sure many of us are aware of that. For me, I'm like, man, I can't stop a hurricane. I'm not a scientist. I can't give out warnings. So I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. Sad to say. I'm sorry. I'm not thinking about, oh, if the government didn't do what, that's not my thoughts that came to my head. I'll be honest with you, is man, I wish I had covered all of those kids with some life insurance policies.
Hmm.
That was the thought that came to my head. I wish we had covered all those kids with some life insurance policies. Yes, these parents lost their children, but at the very least, they would not be going through financial struggles of burying them. And would the money bring them back? No, but it would make it a little bit easier to go through what they're going through.
Yeah, so sad. So from the sound of it, purposefulness is about meaning, and being productive, is like action. You're producing outcomes, hopefully positive outcomes. Laundry, hiring, paperwork, emails, that's being productive. But I think purposefulness is what's the meaning behind what you're doing? Is me answering the emails going to, help in some way? Like what's the desired result of the things that I'm being productive with?
Hmm.
So I think one purposefulness has an aim. So my aim is to help more people. That's why I'm answering these emails. That's the purpose behind being productive. So they're tied together. And I feel like one, like purposefulness is tied to the meaning of what you're doing. Being productive, I see being productive as like a squiggly line. You could be doing a lot of different things.
Right.
I could be updating my emails, or I could be updating my email sequence. I could be tinkering with my landing page, right? I could be organizing my desk, right? Like that, in a way, that's being productive. But being purposeful is you have an end goal in mind. Well, I actually want to sign another client this week. So the purpose of me answering the emails, the purpose of me, cleaning the desk so I could be in a better state of mind is for that ultimate purpose of I want to close another client. That's the meaning behind it. So I think purposefulness is tied to, the end result, like farther down, as opposed to being productive can be cleaning your floor, as much as like as much as that's kind of like a low input activity, you know productiveness versus having a purpose.
Hmm.
One is tied to a goal, a result, and being productive is just the actions, but an action without a purpose is just you wasting your time, you twiddling your thumbs. Does that make sense?
That does. And then let me ask you, do you think you can be purposeful without being productive?
You can be purposeful without being productive. Yeah, you could write a list of goals and say, hey, this is my purpose, and if you're not productive towards those goals, nothing will happen. Right? You
Okay.
can't you can't have one without the other, I think. I mean, you can probably be productive and no goal. That happens all the time, but you can't have purpose without actually being productive, right? My purpose is to help people sign them up for life insurance so they can take care of their families if anything happens. But if you don't
Hmm.
work towards that, does that does that purpose really have a
Yeah.
meaning? Is it going to come to fruition? Is
Yeah.
no. If you like, one precedes the other. You need to be productive in order to make strides towards that purpose.
Yeah.
You're going to preach the word. If your goal is to move people closer to God, but you're not going to do anything related to preaching, to talking people, to proselytizing, to, talking to people, going to church, like if you're not productive in those ways, then what is the point of you having that purpose? It's just an inward idea you're not going to work towards. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's impossible to be purposeful, filled up with purpose, and not be productive. But it is
Yeah,
very easy to be productive and not be purposeful. It's easy
exactly.
to do things and not have a reason for doing them and they mean nothing,
If I
right?
move my if I move my paperweight from left to right, from left to right, I'm technically
That's
doing
production.
something. It's being productive, but what's the meaning? What's the purpose? There's no
Right,
purpose if I'm doing
right.
monotonous, meaningless tasks.
Yes.
And people need purpose. Otherwise, they go crazy. Here's something that they used to do during World War II. They would have like in the US and Germany, they had these camps, right? So they would like they would have the people in the camps dig ditches, and it was anti-tank kind of ditches, right? And so the prisoners, they would work heartily towards these goals, but when the people running the camps started asking the prisoners or telling the prisoners or forcing the prisoners to move dirt from one end of the camp to the other end of the camp. And then once they were done doing that, they moved the dirt back. So they did this meaningless work back and forth, back and forth. The prisoners, what was interesting is the prisoners went insane. They killed themselves. They started acting erratically. They lost their minds because the work that they were doing was so meaningless. They didn't feel that they had any purpose to what they were doing. They could not stand the mental anguish related to doing meaningless work. So that was super interesting to me. They needed a purpose. They needed, like, even if even if it was helpful, if the work was meaningful or helpful in some way, then they could bear through it. But if the work was meaningless, then that was impossible for the human psyche to handle. They needed some meaning to what they were doing. Otherwise, they went insane. And so it was very telling that humans need this purpose. They need their work to mean something. Otherwise, they're going to go down this black hole, that is their mind. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yes. Yes. No, I definitely
Like
agree. We
they,
definitely.
they, they considered it torture. The prisoners considered it torture to just move dirt back and forth, back and forth. They would go insane. But if they were digging holes for a purpose, then they would be psychologically sound and they'd make it through whatever obstacles they were going through in the camps.
Wow. That's really good. Like what I just heard you say is if you are working without a purpose, you are torturing yourself.
It's literally torture. It's
You are,
psychological torture.
you are,
And the prisoners, they would beg they would beg the officers to, have them do something of meaning. They would beg for literally anything else.
wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, guys, make sure whatever we do with a purpose. Don't torture yourself.
Yeah, don't torture yourself. Make sure that there's meaning behind what you're doing. You know, like if you don't have a purpose, where are you going to end up? Do people go to the airports not knowing where they want to go? That's not no. They go to the airports with a destination in mind. They know where they want to go. If they go to the airport without a destination, where are they going to end up? Somewhere where they don't want to be, somewhere where they didn't intend on going. So it's so important to have that goal in mind, to have that purpose. Why am I suffering all these things? Why am I putting myself through all this pain? There has to be an end goal in mind. Even prisoners in jail, they're, well, I'm suffering this sentence so that I can get out of here, see my family again, right? It was Friedrich Nietzsche that said that if you have a why, yeah, then you can endure any how, right? So you can go through, the worst things, but if you have that hope, then you'll be able to survive. You'll be able to thrive, after. Have you heard of the experiment of the mice in the water?
No, I
So
have not heard of that experiment.
so scientists. So first of all, mice are mammals just like us, and they have the same brain functions as humans, right? On a much smaller scale, they have the prefrontal cortex, they have the hindbrain, they have the amygdala. It's all just tiny.
Right. Right.
That's why
Right.
they're so used in these experiments. But the scientists would put a mice in a bowl of water, and they wanted to see how long it would fight to breathe for survival, right? Like the mice is basically just drowning, and it has to like stay afloat. Like how long can this mice stay afloat? Well, they would drop the mice in, and they would swim, frantically trying to get out, and try to stay afloat and not drown for about 16 hours. So okay, 16 hours, that's a long time. So during the experiment, uh, they put the mice in, some would drown, and then in another variation of the experiment, they would put the mice in, and then 8 hours in, they'd pull the mice out, dry it off, let it rest, and then they would put the mice back in. And what happened with these mice is that instead of doing the same 16 hours, they stayed fighting for 72 hours because these mice had the hope and expectation that if I continue doing this, there's going to be a point in the future where they will take me out and I'll survive and I'll live. They had that hope. So because the
Wow.
mice had that hope, had that meaning and purpose that they will survive, that they will get out of this mess, they fought 4 times, 5 times as hard compared to the ones that didn't see any hope. So
Wow.
just that goal, that hope gave them the will to continue fighting for 72 hours to stay alive. And they after 72 hours they died of exhaustion. But they
Wow.
fought to the very end because they had that hope in mind.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's really good. That's an interesting experiment. Especially that's the entrepreneur right there. You must see hope in order to have purpose, or your purpose gives you hope, I should say. Your
Yeah.
purpose gives you
As, a,
hope.
as
So
an, an
as an
entrepreneur,
entrepreneur,
it isn't always as you can attest. I'm sure that it's not all sunshine and rainbow,
oh,
right? You'll
absolutely
have
not.
those downturns. Things will not always go according to plan in your business. I know that's happened to me a lot too. I'll see great success, then I'll see huge failures, and 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 I'm not giving up, right? Because I have seen success in the past. I'm going to continue fighting, and that's my purpose. And it like it's so much harder to motivate somebody that has not seen success. Like if you've been doing the same thing for 5 years and not seen any success, like it's easier for that person to give up than the person who has had a success in
Right.
business. They're going to continue fighting because they have tasted that sweet nectar of success
Yes. And
compared
it's
to
sweet.
somebody who's never seen success and oh, this is not worth it. I've never seen any success. I'm just going to quit. It's just like that rat in the water.
Yes, absolutely. Um, and then with that, on that note, then how do you respond to people that think living to work is a trap? Those people that you hear them, I've had them, especially on your entrepreneurial journey. I think you've had them too, your friends with, Jerry, you're working too hard. Richard, you're working too hard. What's going on, right? Um,
I never feel like I'm working enough is the thing.
exactly. And that's always my response. Working too hard. No, it's never enough. I feel like, I need to do more.
People don't understand the amount of work it takes to succeed, to make a lot of money. People underestimate the amount of work it takes to accomplish some big goal because people either they're not entrepreneurial, they don't think about those things, but like the amount of work to stay the same, like if this is your baseline, the amount of work it takes to get to like the next level is 10 times harder than getting from like just
the previous
the
baseline.
previous
Yes.
level. Like people don't
Yes.
understand the amount of work it takes. People think that like people want to have their cake and eat it too. They maybe think that you don't have to work like people that haven't seen success don't understand the amount of work it takes to achieve that success. They think it's easy. They think they lucked out. They don't see the they don't see the years of being broke. They don't see the hours and focus of, they don't see all the hours of reading, all the hours of courses, all the investments in masterminds. They only see the end result of someone's success, but there's thousands of hours that they put into getting good, into failing miserably, you know. So people just don't understand the amount of work it takes to actually, make $1 million or make, many millions of dollars. It takes a lot more work than people think, and people get humbled as soon as they become entrepreneurs sometimes. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I believe I have the same, kind of mindset when it comes to that. It's never enough for me. Sometimes I'm like, man, I don't have enough hours in the day. But then, there's times I realize, man, okay, I just need to be more efficient because the hours in the day is not going to increase, right? So, but with that, yeah, those people that say, oh, you're working, too much, and my answer is I'm not working enough, just on the sheer fact of this is a purpose on my life and I'm not working for me. And yes, I want success when it comes to money. Money matters. But look at it this way. If you were, and this is drastic, but for an entrepreneur, I'll say this, I think you feel the same way. My business is my baby. This is my baby. Okay. I gave birth. I carried it the 9 months. I did the work. I carried it. I gave birth to it, to blood, sweat, and tears. Right. So with that being said, imagine you had your literal physical child, and the father, so I know this, right? Imagine your physical, literal child. You are at a mountain. You're hanging off of a cliff. The child is holding on to your arms. Will you ever say this is too hard? Will those words that come out of your mouth, will you even think the thought that this is too hard to hold on? No, you would not dare think that thought, right? You would do whatever it takes to pull that child up. You would do whatever it takes in order to bring that child to safety, in order to give that child a future, in order to give that child life. Same thing with business, right? I think when it gets to a point, you're at your breaking point, whereas you might even give up your life. Look at Martin Luther King. He gave his life for his purpose. There's plenty of recordings that show he knew he was going to die. He said, like, they're going to kill me for this, for what I'm doing, right? And he willingly gave his life up for a purpose, right? The Bible says, Jesus said, he who loves his life will lose it, but who willingly gives up his life will have it more abundantly, right? So you have to live through your work. You don't work to live. You live to work because through your work you live and you have life abundantly. As
Yeah.
if Jesus is credible, that's what you should believe.
Yeah, God does not want you to sit at home and do nothing. That's the opposite of what he wants to do. He doesn't want your life to consist of yeah, sitting on the couch, smoking pot, watching TV. That's what the devil wants you to do. He wants you to, he wants you to, waste your life. He wants you
Oh,
to
absolutely. When you
overindulge in the vices.
when you waste your life, your purpose is not being fulfilled. And your purpose being fulfilled is trouble for the devil, right? It spells trouble for him and his demons and, his army, right? Because he knows he's that much closer to losing, which he has already lost, but he's that much closer to the end, right? The more people that fulfill their purpose and come to Christ, because it's all God's plan, right? You fulfill your purpose, you're doing God's work, you're doing God's will, you're part of God's plan. And what is God's plan? Well, to get, to save the believers, to redeem his children, right? So if that is accomplishing that, then it's trouble for the devil and his demons, right? So he wants you to do nothing so you cannot accomplish what you're set forth to accomplish, right? I heard something interesting. I watched it, I think it was on TikTok, where it said, whatever the devil is trying to get you to do, whatever your vice is, that probably is directly connected to your purpose. Meaning, if you're if your urge is to smoke pot, to drink, maybe the devil is trying to silence you, destroy your voice. So he gives you a vice that's going to keep you from doing what you're meant to do. Give you throat cancer, give you lung cancer, those things that stop you from fulfilling your purpose. Um, and if you're struggling with lust, let's say females and things like that, maybe he's trying to destroy you in an area that you can fulfill. Physicality, something physical. Maybe you're supposed to be doing something, physical with all that energy that you have to spend on females, right?
Yeah.
So I thought it was very interesting, and I'm like, oh, I never looked at it that way. But I think that's a prime way to look at it. So when you have those urges to do an opposite of your purpose, just remember that urge is there to serve as a distraction and to serve as a
Yeah.
pitfall to keep you from accomplishing what you need to accomplish.
If you pray for patience, what God isn't going to give you patience. He's going to put people that will make you impatient to test
Oh
your
man,
patience. He's
won't
going
he?
to put that obstacle in your way so that you can become patient.
Amen, brother.
He's not
Amen.
just going to dish it out to you, you know. He's not just going to give it, oh, here's your patience on a silver platter. Boom, now you're patient. No, he's going to put obstacles in your way that test your patience. And that's how he's going to help you become a patient individual.
Amen, brother. Yeah, no, absolutely. You become purposeful by having obstacles the same
Yeah.
way, in order to accomplish your purpose. Awesome, Jerry. Well, this has been very great. Guys, it was very lovely topic for us to talk about. Very exciting. I love this, love purpose, and
Yes. Thank you so much. Great conversation, Rich. Thank you.
absolutely, guys. What are your thoughts? Leave them in the comments. Let us know how you feel about purpose. How do you feel about living to work versus working to live? Do you think it's backwards? Do you think you should be living to work, or do you think you should be working to live? And what makes you feel that way? And how do you guys go about fulfilling your purpose? Answer
Yeah,
those
comment
things
down
in the
below.
comment down below. We definitely would love to hear your thoughts on those things. And if you're not already a subscriber to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. I see that 80% of our viewers are not subscribed. So please do hit that subscribe button, like us, follow us, put that notification on, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.
Yes, thank you so much.